We help aspiring kettlebell coaches become confident as kettlebell practitioners and educators in only 10 weeks. If you want to find out more about our method, check the first link in the description and sign up for our waiting list. So, ladies and gentlemen, I have with me, first of all, welcome to the Kettle Nights podcast. And I'm getting ahead of myself because I have a celebrity with me right here. And when you see him, you immediately recognize him. The cool thing about YouTube is the algorithm is proposing videos to audiences that are similar. And if you see his face, you immediately see the Pioneer, aka Adam. He's in the building with me today, and it's so awesome. I made a couple of videos about the Pioneer, about Adam, so I was hoping he would respond. And he was responding. He was like, let's have a conversation. I proposed it, and now we finally make it happen. So Adam, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it. Yeah, we were just talking about how a celebrity is a bit of a different term on YouTube compared to like your actual celebrities. Yeah, definitely got cross-pollinating viewers, haven't we? For sure.
Most definitely. And you see that in the analytics section of YouTube. They always show like what is your audience watching, and I always see the same faces in the same channels. Like so it's cross-pollination. And funny thing that you're mentioning the aspect of celebrity. I watched about an hour of Tom Brady's roast on Netflix. And Tom Brady, this guy, is a celebrity. Because even here in Switzerland, we don't watch football, or at least I don't watch football. So it's not a very particular sport. I mean, where are you from?
I'm from the UK.
UK. So
England.
England. So soccer is big in our area, right? But football, not that much. But Tom Brady is a face that you recognize. Or at least I know this guy. But on YouTube,
I actually don't know who
Tom you actually don't know?
I'm ruining your point. I actually don't know who Tom. I don't follow most sports, and I've got the worst recognition for celebrities.
I love this.
And it's always like, oh, it's that guy, and I'm like, I don't know who that is.
I love this. See, at the end of the day, let's end this conversation with saying nobody cares. Who's mega famous? Donald Trump is mega famous. Roger Federer, the tennis player, the Swiss guy.
I have heard of him. Yeah.
This guy's famous. Messi, Ronaldo, these guys are famous, right?
Yeah.
But YouTube fame is interesting, right? I mean, I walked through FIBO a couple of months ago, which, by the way, was such a horrible experience because I saw the kettlebell represented there, but only as decoration, and that really got on my nerves. Oh, okay. But actually, some people recognized my face, and they were like, "Oh yeah, kettlebells, awesome." And so what I then really love is the way we connect this through the kettlebell. You know, I don't consider myself a celebrity walking around like you're supposed to recognize me, right? But it's all about the kettlebell. That's.
Yeah, well, there's like celebrities within niches, aren't there? Like, you know, if you're really into like psychology or programming, like there'll be someone who's written a book on that, and to you, they're a massive deal. But like, you know, your mate's not going to have any idea who they are.
Exactly. Same in the kettlebell. Like, so Pavel said, you know, people from outside don't even know who Pavel is.
Yeah, right? Even if you're in fitness, you know Pavel, but like outside of, like, my wife doesn't know who Pavel Tsatsi is. Like,
of course not. Yeah. No disrespect, right? Before anybody gets mad about this, no disrespect, but that's the world that we live in. If you Kim Kardashian, these guys are famous, right? These are big time celebrities, but YouTube is something else. Unless you're Mr. Beast or PewDiePie, that's probably another, right? All right, so hey, I talk way too much. So what we do in the beginning, Adam, is always we want our guests to introduce themselves. And like I said, many of our listeners and people who watch already know who you are. But please give us your background. How did you turn into the Pioneer? How did you turn into this functional fitness machine? And what happened? So give us your backstory.
Yeah, so it's weird because like I've literally ever since I was a little kid just been really interested in fitness. Like fitness, but actually even more so than fitness, like performance. And I wanted to be a superhero. I think like every kid wants to be a superhero. I didn't really grow out of it. And an action hero as well. Like I loved Arnie films, Stallone films. And actually my big guy, Jackie Chan was my number one. Like I would just buy the DVDs, fast forward to the fight scenes, just watch them over and over again. So like to me, it was like a no-brainer. I'm gonna work out. So I started like, I've never been like out of shape, like, you know, there's been times where I'm not like crazy strong and stuff, but there's never been a time where I haven't been actively working out regularly. And I was like not interested in really aesthetics originally, or, you know, big numbers at the gym. I just wanted to like move like Jackie Chan, or move like, you know, Spider-Man, or, you know, just, like, and see what the body could do. Like I found it so interesting. I think, part of it when I was younger, like my dad died when I was 9, and I think for
Mm,
me, like a lot of like comic books and action films like helped me through it, and they were
mm,
sort of like filled that like father figure role, someone to aspire to. So that's maybe where some of that obsession came from. And also, just like you're sort of at a bit of a low, obviously, at that point, and it's
of
like,
course.
I'm sort of trying to pull yourself back up and be strong and all this stuff. So, it sort of really resonated with me. And then I met my step granddad, and he'd like been in the military as a bodyguard in Egypt, and he
Wow.
started teaching me. Yeah, he had this cool backstory. And I don't know like that much about him actually. Like as a kid, I just you learn differently as a kid.
Yeah, of
So
course.
he had me.
Yeah, yeah.
He taught me like pressure points and like some basic self defense, and he
Mm,
got me doing like he loved the film Shogun, and he liked all his martial arts films as well. So we'd watch them
mm,
together. We did Tai Chi together, and then he
mm.
set me like these like training. I've mentioned this on the channel before, and a couple of people saying like I want to hear about this because it sounds like a sort of anime relationship, but it kind of was like I think he was like doing it, for the fun of it as well. But I was eating it up. He'd have me like lifting buckets of water and doing like sit ups with a stick behind my head and like trying to catch coins really quickly and like just
Oh
being in
man,
that
Mr. Miyagi
frame of
style. I love that. I love
yeah,
that.
he was like my Mr. Miyagi, and like I
Yes.
absolutely loved it. And I think I was like the age of 10 or 11, and I was just like, I'm gonna work out every week, like at least 3 times a week, 4 times a week. I remember specifically, I watched the film Exit Wounds with Steven Seagal, and
Oh,
like
and
Steven Seagal is
DMX.
not
And
one of the
DMX.
yeah,
And
yeah,
DMX.
yeah,
Oh
yeah.
my, that's
And for some reason
big.
that when he was in the changing room and he punches and then the other guy's bicep like catches his arm, and I was just like,
Oh
that's so
yes, that
cool.
boom. That move. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. That like really
Exactly.
spoke to me, and I like, I want to like I'm gonna work out forever now. I decided that, and then I never
Gonna
missed it
work out
after that.
forever
I
now.
just
I love that.
yeah, and then I just did. So like yeah, I was like teaching myself, and my workouts after that started of just doing like hundreds and hundreds of reps of push-ups and pull-ups, and then I had dumbbells. And this is also when I had a kettlebell, because I don't know where I got one from. I think it was Tesco. This is before like they came back. I had a kettlebell, a light kettlebell, and I just did
What was
it
that?
like
How long is that ago?
that was ages ago. I'm talking like probably 15 at that point. So I'd already been doing exercise a few years. It was
Hmm.
like a curiosity,
In the
like,
90s,
but I just,
90s, 2000s around?
yeah, it would have been 2000s, I reckon,
Yeah.
very early 2000s
Wow.
or very late 90s. Yeah. So, I mean, they were odd, but like, I didn't think anything of it. I just had it. And I mainly did, I don't even know where I got this move from. I mainly did crossbody clean and press.
Uh-huh.
I think you
Uh-huh.
saw it in that video. You
Uh-huh.
said, oh, I don't know if you're trying to do a snatch or what, but no,
Snatch
I
or
was doing
clean
a
press.
really, crisp, but then I would do it really quickly. I just did loads of those for some reason. I used to think that's like the best move to get gassed out. That's why I used it for, as if I wanted to
Uh-huh.
get
Uh-huh.
myself gassed out, I'd do
See,
loads and loads of those.
see
But my
there's
training like was all sort of yeah was made up. I was just doing stupid numbers of high reps of push-ups, and I was like varying the tempo as well, even back then, just kind of doing what made sense. But from there, like I just I'm really lucky because I was like so passionate about it, and I got to make it my career. And I decided to take psychology at university because I wanted to, with my interest in performance, it wasn't just the body. I also wanted to learn about the brain. And that, so like most people
good
choose
decision.
a
Yeah.
course they think is going to be like a career.
Uh-huh.
And I'm
Uh-huh.
like, I'm going
Uh-huh.
to be a superhero. I'm going to do psychology because I was a nutcase.
It's
I did my
how did
dissertation
this
on transhumanism.
what and yeah, I read that on your page. You got to talk about this, but isn't it one of my clients? He said that the psychology is the art of the arts, or something like this. It's a catchphrase that he said in German,
Yeah.
and because it's so powerful, because you understand the human being from an angle that almost makes you fairly intimidating, because you understand how the human body, how the human brain works. I see it now, and that's just as a side note. I see it now from the sales and marketing perspective, how you're able
Yeah.
to completely influence. And if you take it to the extreme, you can even manipulate the buyer's decision to a certain extent.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah. There's a lot of that going on.
Wow, this is
But yeah, I
powerful.
mean, from I was really interested in it. When you learn it at university, it's a lot more kind of practical and stuff. I think my friend made a Facebook group saying like, yes, I study psychology. No, I don't know what you're thinking, sort of thing, because people kind of think you're like a wizard when you do psychology. But for me, like, I found the neuroscience the most interesting part of it, and like that's something that's really interested me and informed my training. Like, learning not just about training the muscle, but the motor patterns and the fiber recruitment and all that. Like, I found that so interesting. And yeah, there's lots of schools of psychology, so like how effective it is depends on which school you follow and what your goals are. Just like fitness, you got like cognitive behavioral therapy and psychodynamic theory and neuroscience, and all these they're completely different essentially, and some are not woo woo, but tenuous,
Oh,
and then
interesting.
others are very concrete, so it really depends. But yeah, so
Interesting.
and then
Yeah.
from that, like, I left university and I became a copywriter, and I was writing. I've always worked for myself, so I was a copywriter writing health and fitness stuff, and that's when I made my first YouTube channels. And this is like my first YouTube videos is like 15 years ago, and it was just me doing like
Wow.
pull-ups in my pants in my sister's
but
bedroom.
you were that's wow. So 15 years ago, 2006, YouTube was
Something like that, yeah.
conceived, so to speak, from this guy with that one particular video where he's filming himself
Yeah.
in a zoo. So that's 2006.
Yeah, that's famous one.
So that's 2009. So your first video, you uploaded
Something like
it.
that, yeah.
Wow. Did you at the
Yeah,
moment
so
when you uploaded to YouTube, did you had this kind of like foresight where you thought, wow, I think this is going to be something big?
yeah, no, you know what? Not really. No, I was an odd
Just for
kid. Like,
fun.
if something came along, I just do it. Like, I had a website. I'd had a website for years by then. I had a GeoCities one originally. Then I learned like HTML and stuff and built one. And it's just like whenever the next thing came along, I just assumed, oh, the internet's a thing now, so we should all have a website. Like, what's your website? This is mine, kind of thing. And the same with YouTube. I was like, oh, now we can make videos. I'm going to make one. And I didn't really give it any more thought than that. And I was in my, like, not boxers, they were like sleep pajama shorts, and like they were indecent. And I just like I don't know, I was like a special kid. At this point I'm like 21 or 22, and I just thought, why would you get dressed fit? Because that's how I trained. I always trained in my bedroom in like pants. So that's how I'm going to make my video.
Yeah, that's what's up.
Yeah.
It's awesome.
But
Awesome.
so at that point, like, then I was writing I was writing like up to 10,000 words a day. Well, even more than that eventually. A combination, it was either health and fitness, because I had a couple of websites I wrote for, but this is like garbage quality. It's like high volume. It's for SEO predominantly, and I would just get paid per word. And I did that, and I did just more like general copywriting stuff and technology stuff. But then I was like, that like informed more and more of my knowledge of fitness. Like, I was like just researching all these topics, and I thought, I'm going to start personal training. So I went on Fiverr and I started training people on Fiverr. And that took off surprisingly, because within the first week of posting, I was featured in the local newspaper just by pure coincidence. So that was a cool experience, because I got to train like a bunch of like random, like online. So I wasn't seeing them in person, but I was writing their programs and occasionally critiquing their.
Yeah.
And so I was working with surfers and like and old ladies, like the spectrum of, and not charging anywhere near enough either. But
but it's the first steps, right? Understand? Yeah, that's how you build
experience.
Yeah, the experience. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Fascinating.
And so that's when I decided I was going to get a personal training qualification. But I just did like, basically, I felt like I already had a lot of knowledge at this point, but I wanted to have something, so that if people ask me, like, well, are you just talking out your ass? I'd have at least something. So yeah, I did so I did that, and then I made an app in my free time that did quite well, and I got approached by Android Authority. I don't know if you heard of that YouTube channel, but they basically
Android Authority.
Yeah, they've got 3 point something million subscribers now.
Oh wow!
But at that time they were quite big, and they basically recruited me as a presenter on there, and doing coding tutorials, and a writer. And from that kind of, sorry, this is going on for ages, isn't it?
Yeah, take your time. Take your time. That's what it is. That's totally fine. I'm interested. I'm listening.
So I mean, feel free to edit out whatever you think is irrelevant. But basically, they kind of helped me up my game in terms of production quality and stuff. And then so I brought that to my channel, which kind of helped it grow further. And then lockdown happened, and that helped it grow further. I think, you know, a lot of people were looking for ways to train from home and train in different ways, which is obviously what I was talking about at this point. And like during that time as well, my approach to training had like changed multiple times. Like when I started, like I was, you know, say I want to be a superhero, so I was doing martial arts and I was doing rock climbing and I was doing bodybuilding at home, which is a weird combination. That a lot of like bodybuilding, but with a lot of body weight stuff in there, but with like a bodybuilding approach. So I was like going to failure all the time, looking to build muscle. But then I got sort of more into the bodybuilding. I was doing the copywriting and I was just sitting for long stretches of time. And that's when I started to notice my mobility start to fail, and you know, I had to start to pick up injuries and things. And so that's when I realized, like, you know, if you want to be, you know, a super, or you know, if you want to explore like human performance, like you're going to need to fix up your training and sort this out. And that's where the kind of like the functional, you know, where I became interested in functional training. You know, I know it's a bit of a dirty word, but you know, what I consider to be functional training. And then just, and to me, that means incorporating as much as possible, because, you know, it's no good to be super strong, but you can't climb the stairs without getting out of breath, or a marathon runner, but you're built like a twig, you know. Like to me, like everyone, I think all these people are amazing, and you know, who are at the top of their game, and follow whatever your passion is. But for me, like I was more interested in being like fairly decent at everything rather than just amazing at one thing and terrible at everything else, you know. So yeah, that kind of evolved that. And then, you know, selling my programs and my book, like over time, like I developed more of a system that, you know, it's not groundbreaking, but it's fairly unique to me, and you know, some people seem to quite like it. So I mean, that's kind of where I am now, I guess.
Wow. Yeah. And when was the moment when you took your YouTube journey seriously? When you found out, wow, I think this is going to places?
Yeah, so I think just as I was making it, just as I got contacted by Android Authority, because they basically saw I'd made a big app, and they'd seen that I had a YouTube channel, and they thought that I was all right at presenting. So they thought this combination of skills. But around that exact time, I made a video on Bruce Lee. And I don't know if you've seen it. It's old and terrible, like on every, like I look overweight. The camera quality is awful. Like it's a bad video, but it got like that was like my first over 1 million views video.
Wow.
Just
Yeah,
out
the,
the
the
blue, and it
algorithm
still
doesn't
gets
care,
loads of
right?
views.
Yeah, it's funny. The algo's like, I'm gonna pick this one, and years later you're like,
Exactly.
why did you choose this particular video?
I know. I mean, obviously Bruce Lee, yeah, but I've done other
Yeah.
ones on Bruce Lee since that are better, and they've not had
They're
the
way
same
better,
traction.
and the algorithm's
Yeah.
like, no, we're gonna stick
No,
with
this
this
one.
one.
That's the
This
one. Yeah.
that's
Awesome.
the one.
Thanks, YouTube. Everyone's first exposure to me is like, you know,
But isn't
no
it funny?
definition.
Isn't it funny? Isn't it funny that we look at this best performing video and we think, wow, you know, camera quality, I don't look that good. I probably don't have the knowledge that I have today. Maybe I'm even saying something that isn't quite right along the lines of truth. But
Yeah.
people who watch it get some value out of it. And this is the reason why I think the algo then keeps pushing it, because so many people keep clicking on it, and there is something in there. But we, you know, being overly critical, sometimes dismiss the fact that it's helpful to other people. So, all right,
Yeah.
be it as it may,
doesn't
right?
have to be perfect. Yeah.
Yeah.
I've got a friend and collaborator you might have seen on the channel sometimes, Grant Stevens.
Yeah, a younger guy who he did a
Yeah.
functional
No,
training
he's
workout
not.
with purpose.
He's the same age as me.
All right. Oh, okay.
But everyone says he's a younger guy.
I apologize. He looks young. No.
Right.
He looks young
He does.
Yeah.
He's not a parent. I think that's the difference. But also, he does like a skincare regime, and I don't do any of that.
Okay. Okay. Love it.
It's a sore point. But no, he's got like the most incredible form. Like as soon as we started to work together, I was just like, dude, like, you know, your martial arts. And like me, he's inspired by like martial arts films. So like his performance just, it really appeals to me. But he's so critical of himself. He's like, oh yeah, that sidekick wasn't quite right. Like, can we film it again? I'm like, oh, you're nuts. Like, it looked so cool. But like to him, but you know, the vast majority of people are going to know even less than me watching it, because you know, I've at least done martial arts, but most people are going to know even less than me. So if I think his psychic looks superhuman, they think it looks just incredible, but he's still not happy with it. We've got to take another take. So yeah, it's really hard to, and like I mean, and you know how I was saying, like, I started working out in my room with all the push-ups and everything, and like nobody would say like this is a good workout. Like there was so much missing from the workouts, but like it got me into it, and it actually I discovered some stuff that I have stuck with, and like I was getting a lot of my information from I had Arnie's bodybuilding book. I think everyone had, and I had Men's Health, and you know just advice from mates and stuff, and like that's how we learned back then. Like these days, the information on YouTube is like, I know that there's some drivel out there, but you can get access to such high level information that just didn't exist.
It's crazy.
Like, I mean, maybe like where would you even find that?
Yeah.
Like calisthenics.
Yeah.
Calisthenics is deep. Like if you want to do a handstand, if you want to do like a planche, a front planche, like the amount of like knowledge you need, because you need the hollow body, the protracted scapula, you need the bicep tendons, all of this. And like where I have no idea how I would have possibly known that like as a teenager. Whereas these days you've got people breaking this stuff down. That's like common knowledge now almost. But my point is like I approached that in that way, and I turned out all right. And obviously it's really important that you don't teach wrong form that's going to injure somebody. But yeah, like as we were sort of discussing a little bit, there's such a thin line between scaremongering or gatekeeping versus like what, as long as you're biomechanically sound, as long as you're not like, you know, hunched over when you shouldn't be. And I mean, even then, like people will say, well, the body's meant to hunch, use a lighter weight. Using a lighter weight is basically, I think I saw in one of your videos, you say just use a lighter weight, get stuck in, but use a lighter weight, like, and you'll probably be all right. Like, yeah, we shouldn't like, you know, be scared of exercise. I think the body's more resilient than we give it credit for. And I'm someone who's been injured a lot as well. Which doesn't really back up my point, but I've always recovered. You know, you just got
but you're raising such a valuable point about this technique and injury thing. I came across that video, and no, I have to backtrack a little bit. I was always on that technique form train, always. Gotta look good, gotta look solid, blah blah, or you die. You know, I was that type of dude as well, even in my later YouTube career. And then I got this one comment where somebody was like, Gregory, you're missing the mark. Injury has nothing to do with technique. Injury happens when load exceeds capacity. My immediate reaction was, come on, man. So, but I stuck with it. I'm like, that sounds interesting. It's not like some kind of hate comment. Sounds, and I've learned a lot from the comments that I got on my YouTube channel.
Me too, right?
Right?
Yeah, this crowdsourced knowledge.
Yes, the crowdsourced knowledge, the constructive feedback. It's like, wow, if you're not open to this, what you get, I mean, you even have more subscribers than I have, but you get thousands of comments throughout the months, and you get so much feedback from people from all around the world. And then most of the time,
my form on loads of stuff.
It's awesome, right? It's awesome.
Giving me ideas and
especially when it's constructive, you know. I mean, even in
always.
It's not always, but even in the most vile comments, sometimes I saw some nugget of truth, right? But to get back to my point, so this guy posts that comment. So I went down that rabbit hole, and come to find out, there was a guy. His name was Muggs. Is his last name Kevin or Rodney? Kevin Muggs something. I go down that rabbit hole, and come to find out, this guy made a video where he was condensing lots of research and scientifically sound knowledge into a 4-minute video where he talks about the following. He says, lots of the times, many people are preoccupied with the biomechanical reality of movement, and that is, your glutes are not firing properly, you don't hinge, you bend over, blah, 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 blah. But it seems, I have to say, it seems that research seems to point out that this is not the main cause for injury. The main cause for injury is if load exceeds capacity. And then he says, if you have a brick and you let it fall and it drops on your foot, then you injure yourself because the load was too much for the capacity. The body was not able to handle it because it happened so quickly, right? And so he says that's the same thing if you're lifting weights. If you lift weights too much too quickly, or you go into all-out burpee mode, but your ligaments are not there yet, or not strong yet, your muscles are not there yet, your fitness is not capable of, and you think, I got to do 3 sets of 20 burpees, and then you almost die, you're gassed out, and the next day something aches and hurts. This means the load was too much for the capacity.
Yeah, exactly. And then, but the limit of the capacity is obviously depends on the angle and the joint you're targeting. So,
Exactly. So
yeah,
he follows up with saying capacity is always a question of structural integrity. How much integrity is there in this particular movement area? So you've talked about some the hunch over position in the deadlift, right? Where a very
yeah,
advanced lifter might have no problem with a very heavy
yeah.
very
Look
heavy
at
Jefferson
Jefferson.
curl,
Yeah,
right? Somebody else might have some issue because, as you probably know, when you coach lots of people, the hip is, I call it glute amnesia. Lots of
yeah.
people
I
have,
had that big time.
right? They don't know how to
Yeah,
move the hips. They don't know how to work with them. And in the hips are located are your strongest muscles. And if you do not know how to move them, you're in trouble, right? If you're trying to
yeah,
exercise, especially with weights. So then for this
for
type
sure.
of person, a Jefferson curl might be an issue because it's too early. Not saying that your spine should not bend to a
Yeah,
certain extent,
yeah. Or perhaps
but
even a Jefferson curl with no weight is a good way to start
that's the
learning. Yeah,
point. That's the point. But what this
yeah,
goes against is this big educational approach that we have in the fitness sphere. You call it gatekeeping. And funny thing is, lots of podcast guests that I have on said the same thing. They use the word
yeah,
gatekeeping, which I really like. I think it describes it in a perfect manner. It's like you're not supposed to snatch a kettlebell until you've taken a course or
yeah.
work with an instructor that I certified. Until then, you should leave that thing alone, right?
Yeah, but I mean, even those coaches at some point, one of them like learned from someone else, learned from someone else. One of them just made it up. You know,
Exactly, exactly.
yeah, it's their company, isn't it?
Yeah, it's in that video that you posted about the goblet squat, right? Where you said, "Oh, I didn't
Yeah,
even know it was invented by Dan John," and in my reaction, I said, "Who cares, right? Who cares?
yeah,
Let's." Is not Władysław Pytlazinski was a very pivotal figure in the early 19th century, along with Władysław Krajewski and Uncle Vanya or Ivan Lebedev. These three heavyweights, and by the way, these three guys took knowledge and education that they learned from the European guys, from Georg Hackenschmidt. Even Georg Hackenschmidt was then in Russia or in Tsarist Russia, but you had folks like Eugene Sandow and all these European strongmen, Felice Napoli, and that's a long time ago. So in that area, lots of the exercises were developed to a certain extent, right?
yeah,
The
yeah,
clean and the press or a snatch.
yeah,
At the end of the day, like you said, somebody came up with it. And we don't give these
yeah,
guys credit. I'm doing the snatch,
yeah.
which, by the way, was invented by Władysław Pytlazinski. Nobody says that. All right?
Yeah.
But,
The only
yeah.
reason I said that though, I told you Dan John
Yeah,
actually
yeah, yeah.
commented on that video. I was like, oh, I wonder who created this, and I was like, oh man, he's mad at me for not mentioning him. I didn't know that he obviously he's awesome and that's a cool move. But like a couple of commenters also said, like people did used to squat down with stuff, before it was called the goblet squat. Like
Exactly.
it's just how you move in
Exactly.
it.
And I love Dan. I had him on a podcast a couple of times, and he always he mentioned this a couple of times. Like, Gregory, who invented the goblet squat? Tell me. I'm like, sir, you sir.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah, well, I mean, like, yeah, it's funny. Some exercises like do become. I mean, you should call it the Dan John squat. Like you got your Arnold presses, haven't you? So you always remember
The Dan John
who came up
squat.
with the Arnold press.
I mean, we
Yeah,
call the burpee by a guy named Royal Burpee.
yeah, the Lalane push up, which I was corrected on recently because I was calling it the Lalande push up for decades, despite
Oh, the
loving that
lane
move.
push up. What does that look like? The lane push
The
up?
Lalane is it's the Superman push up you might have heard of, where your
Yeah,
arms
this
are
one.
extended over your head.
Ooh.
Yeah, yeah, and that guy was like a a TV personality, sort of fitness icon, and he said that he came up with that one. And I was for years calling it the Lalande push up, just because I'd only read it, not heard it spoken out loud. And then I made a video all about the Lalande push up, and there's dudes are like, it's Lalane. I'm like, that's how you learn.
But at the end of the day, these descriptions, right, and then adding the prefix of a name or something. At the end of the day, right, it's a squat, it's a push up, it's a swing,
Yeah.
it's a clean. There are variations, but the double front squat,
Yeah.
right, with double kettlebells.
Yeah.
All right, so that's the double front squat, or
Yeah.
a front squat. That's it.
Yeah. Yeah,
Somebody once
Especially
came up and
kettlebell.
that's it.
There's a lot, there's a few moves where they seem to have like multiple names, which makes it tricky to like describe what you mean, like
Most
cross body
definitely.
swings and like, I mean, this one, not this one, and I'm doing it like this, which is a bit different. But I saw this guy do it like that, and that guy says to do it like this, but I prefer his way. That, so
I
like, what do
think
you call that? It's
I think that's the issue. That's the issue of fitness in general. We don't have no strict rule set, and we don't have no standards to a certain extent. It's like everybody can call everything
yeah,
everything, right? And so that
yeah,
mixes, and especially in the kettlebell sphere, where things get really murky, where you have the hard style swing, and then you have a kettlebell sports swing, which doesn't even exist because these guys don't never swing. They just snatch
yeah.
a long cycle and jerk. That's it. But it gets
And then
so
you do the kind of like hybrid style, don't you?
yeah,
Like
I
between
mix it
the
a
two,
little
and
bit, and I gave it a little bit of
yeah,
a name, and then here's the key. I still think there is this hybrid approach. I got it from Steve Carter because I was
yeah,
Steve Carter's my sensei. He taught me the right. I really have to call it like this, the right ways of the kettlebell. Because prior
yeah,
to Steve, I was just treating the kettlebell like a weird shaped dumbbell. I did not
yeah,
understand what this tool is capable of and why and what its best usage is. And after Steve, this really opened up yeah, he's the reason why I'm doing what I do today.
yeah,
And afterwards, I then really went into the rabbit hole and I found out, wow, there is this divide, like these two styles, these two
yeah,
ideas. So I followed it a little bit until I realized, we like I mentioned before we started the recording, we work with over 40s, over 50s, over 60s on a personal training basis, on a group training basis, online. We have lots of people who just sign up for courses from all around the world who don't work with us directly, but just use the courses. And I stopped this overcomplicating things. It's a
yeah,
hand-to-hand swing. Well, is it sport hard? Nobody cares. Just swing that thing,
yeah, yeah,
and you're good, right? And and
yeah,
and from that perspective, lots of people don't really like this approach that I'm giving because it sort of it completely destroys the idea of the gatekeeper.
yeah,
And
yeah,
I realize that's kind of like I consider it a little bit my mission to snatch, right? Try it.
yeah,
You're probably sane enough to not snatch a 32 kg for the first time. I'm assuming,
yeah,
right? All
yeah,
right.
yeah,
So if you're a woman, try the 8 kg. You're a man, try the 12. Yeah, but you're not gonna die. You're not gonna hurt yourself. Just make sure your arms is extended. Maybe you're using all of your arms. That doesn't matter. Just try. You're not gonna die. I promise you.
yeah.
All right.
Yeah, and like I say, if you do overbalance and you're just holding 8 kilograms, or just even lighter, whatever's right for you, you're not going to hurt yourself because you're not going to fall over if you've got something that's equivalent to a bag of shopping or that you're just used to carrying around, and that's then like you say, it's when the weight exceeds capacity. That's how you get the capacity, isn't it? By doing that, and then also how you refine the motor patterns. But this is also what I like about the kettlebells because the problem is with getting very, very strong in specific just linear movement patterns is that you might become extremely strong and sturdy in those ways, but then the minute you lean a bit forwards or you lean a bit backwards or you twist slightly, that's when you're putting yourself in for trouble. Like the classic thing is that the power lifter who puts his back out picking up a sock or something, and I've not done much powerlifting other than bench press, but I've been that guy who's been really strong, but I have put my back out picking up a sock, literally. That's because
Really?
you
Did that
you never
happen to
pick
you?
at that awkward. Yeah, yeah, yeah. I've actually got like a sort of a chronic back issue with back spasms. It runs in my family. It's a constant thing that
Interesting.
I'm battling
Interesting.
against, which
Hmm.
and I've been doing a lot better, but I wasn't ever doing any hip hinges at the time. This is during that phase where I was like bodybuilder who writes, and I didn't
Hmm. Hmm.
um, pay attention to every angle. But the nice thing about the kettlebell is that every movement is slightly different because momentum is such a big part of it. You're like
Hmm.
guiding it. Like
Hmm.
instead of it being a completely, if you are doing a snatch or a swing or something like that, it's not a completely straight path every single time. Every single one's going to be slightly different. And Nikolai Bernstein, neurophysiologist, describes it as creating more robust movement patterns. So like instead of there being just one area, one direct line where you're really strong, you've got like a little bit of wiggle room because you're used to moving in slightly more dynamic ways. And in the book, The Brain That Changes Itself, there's a really good analogy, which is like when you're rehearsing a movement, it's like going down a ski slope. And if you take the exact same route every time, then you create this really deep groove in the slope, which means you're amazing at going down following that groove, but you're not going to be able to go anywhere else because that's all still thick snow. But whereas if you take a slightly different path every time, you're creating a wide flat surface. Like he wasn't talking about it in fitness, but it applies so well. And now you can make a slight mistake without being at serious injury because you've got those more robust movement patterns. And then that's exactly what you're doing with something like kettlebells. One of the things that's so cool about it is that it is slightly different every time. You are at those awkward angles, but if you're learning using a lighter weight to begin with, you're building up, the motor patterns, you're building up the tendons, the fascia, the supporting muscles, so that you can deal with the slightly unexpected. Like when my kid runs at me and leaps into me when I'm squatting on the floor and I'm not expecting it, like she has no regard for my health or safety. And but I can usually cope with it because
how come?
I have to tell. Yeah, she was just like, "Oh, just jab my elbow into his leg." Like, why? I'll just see what happens.
Let's just be a kid. Let's see what happens. Let's get a reaction out, Daddy.
Yeah,
that's what's up. Man,
literally
awesome.
leap off the stairs onto my neck, when I'm not expecting it. But that's where it's useful to have made a few mistakes and have trained a bit differently. Because you are stronger in different positions.
Wow.
It's just like knees over toes, isn't it?
Yeah.
That's something I really find interesting.
That's
something I'm trying to incorporate more and more, because for me, one of the ultimate ways to do this is actually with certain types of sport, like swimming, like trail running in particular, boxing, and kettlebells, all movements that have more variety in them. You don't get the hypertrophy to the same extent because you don't have the specificity, you don't have the intensity, but you're creating that wide base. And I think if you can combine the two, if you can combine the more varied movement with the more intense stimulus for hypertrophy, you've got a really good grounding for all sorts of performance. And that's where combining more stuff, I think, is interesting.
Most definitely. That's why I always say that the kettlebell is one of the best. Lots of people it's one of the best tools, and I always say, I would slightly alter the statement by saying it's one of the best generalists tool. It touches many bases of physical qualities all at once, and it gives you this, like you're describing, this wide base. And you also described this in your video, this in-between movements. It's actually a great description because the ballistic element has this unforeseeness to it. It's the unknown. It's the unpredictability. Even if you're very used to swinging, snatching, and cleaning, especially the ballistics, it always forces your body into certain angles, especially if you use heavier weights and if you're very advanced. When I use the 28 and the 32, it brings me into different angles, even as I'm getting tired a little bit, and I let it pull me a little bit more. And it's this, what I believe, it's my hypothesis that the kettlebell does rebuild the elastic component of the body, which we lose as we age. And I had a weightlifting scientist on a podcast who described it like this. He said, "Do you know why cheetahs are the fastest animals?" And I said, "No." He said, "Because they coil their spine." It's not the strength. It's the ability, the elastic ability of the spine that gives them this exploding, fast, twitch-like movements that have nothing to do with strength, because it's not the strongest animal, not at all, right? And so rebuilding this elastic component is one thing that, especially in the hips, most of us are tight in the hips because we sit on it all day. And I believe that's why we get so often these comments that back pain has either improved or even eliminated. They just feel better, that the running gets better. All this transfer effect into many different areas, which Pavel coined the "what the hell" effect. But at the end of the day, it's just a specific adaptation that you never engage in if you don't swing weights for particular longer sets of time, especially bells in that regard, or kettlebells. Of course, you get a different stimulus and a different adaptation. And this is why the kettlebell shines the most. It's the ballistic element attached to it, which lots of people do not really engage in when they, like you said, when they only engage into hypertrophy. Yes, you don't get this maximum stimulus, but as we all know, is if you specialize into something, into one area, especially on a physical perspective, you're weak in other areas. So you're Ronnie Coleman, the most muscular. All right, awesome, right? But I mean, let's put his injuries to the side. Let's just say if you're the most muscular man on earth, I guarantee you, probably your mobility is not that great. Your heart has probably built up some tissue that I don't know if you. It's an awesome book by Dr. Candice J. It's called The Cardio Code, and in
Yeah, no.
that book, he describes that you don't want to get the powerlifter's heart.
Yeah.
Because he says when you train in that fashion where you always have to pull heavy and then you contract and then you hold the flow of air because you breathe in, right, the Valsalva maneuver and anything, what this creates is it thickens the wall of the heart muscle, which so the heart muscle has hypertrophy going on, but that's actually not the good kind of hypertrophy. What you want is
Yeah.
increased capacity of the insides, right? And
Yeah.
that's so fascinating, and that's why, especially as we grow a little bit older, we understand we should or it makes sense to take a little bit more of a wide base approach, which we now call functional training, or I like to call it practical training, where you use everything at your disposal, right?
Yeah. Yeah, that's it. I think the kettlebell like plugs gaps that really aren't that well covered by an awful lot of other stuff. Like in terms of the ballistic, I think another comment on my video was that the kettlebell swing is a ballistic deadlift, and that's why it translates so well to everything. That made such sense because like the deadlift itself translates to so much, but you do it in that grindy fashion. Whereas if you're doing it in an explosive fashion, and also just that number of reps is just so good for like ingraining that movement pattern. Like when I bend over, I'm gonna hip hinge, like which I needed. I now do. I try and most days do some kettlebell swings, even if it's only like 15, just to say like, come awake, glutes. Like I'm not going to have you, because I know what happens when you disappear. But yeah, that's exactly it. That's being a specialist is awesome if you want to be the top of your game. And I think that's the problem. Like most people don't. That's one of my mission statements is to try and like suggest to people like you don't have to be the best at one thing. Like that actually doesn't make sense for most people. Like people will critique like the kettlebell or whatever else, saying, "Oh, but you're not going to build maximum strength like that." I'm like, but why do you want maximum strength? Once you got to the point where, like, if you can bench press 150 kilograms and all you're focused on is going up to 155, I can't see. Like, it is cool, like definitely, like kudos, but I can't see if you're interested in just health and fitness. There's no tangible benefit, and it takes so much effort to add that 5 kilograms when maybe like your cardio could use some work, and they'll be like, yeah, but I won't be as strong. And it's like, but that's okay. Like you don't need to be, but that's how everybody seems to think. And they like, I don't know. It seems to me you get into fitness, and for a lot of people, they just get funneled down this powerlifting route or this bodybuilding route.
Yeah,
And then once they get to a certain,
100%.
and when they get to the certain, standard, then all they do is like, I'm going to get better and better and better and better at this one thing, because I guess it's like sunk cost and all that. They want to, and maybe they enjoy it, which is great. But if your original goal was to be healthier and fitter, then that doesn't make sense, because you're training like a specific athlete at the expense of all your other qualities. Like, my kettlebell swinging is nowhere near as good as like you or Mark Wildman or any of the other top guys. My handstands are like nowhere near as good as fitness FAQs or the bodyweight warrior. Like my martial arts is terrible. Everyone tells me how bad my boxing is, but like my goal is to bring a combination of those things, and then like at least I can like hang with people. Like it's cool. Like, and I'm okay with not being the best, because like you got to look at the bigger picture. And then that's where people will critique functional training. And functional training can kind of mean what you want it to mean, which is, this is my version of functional training. People say, what's the point of functional training? Every movement has a function. All movements are functional training. Therefore, functional training is nonsense. But I say, I'm not telling you, that's my point. All movements have a purpose. It's the program. Like, what are you missing out? Because you can be doing all these functional exercises. Powerlifter, you're getting stronger. It's all functional. But if you can't go for a long jog, or if you can't touch your toes, to me, that's not functional. So it's not about what you're doing being wrong. It's about what you're not doing that maybe you could benefit from. And you don't have to go all in, but just like for a lot of people, just adding a little bit of mobility or adding a little bit of cardio could do them such wonders. And they're so afraid to like lose 5 kilograms on their squat or whatever. But it's like, no offense, you're probably not going to be a world champion squatter. Like, this serves you no benefit. You can't put that much weight on your back in the real world. There's no scenario where you would ever use that. And it translates to running speed and jumping height, but so do a ton of other things. So to me, just variety is the spice of life. And that's the thing as well. Like, anything where you go too far, I think you're eventually going to start to see yourself degrade in certain ways. Like, repetitive strain injury, I don't think is necessarily about usually that you've done something too much. It's that you've done something too much at the without doing the opposite movement or without doing the surrounding movement. So you've created imbalances. Like it's not the exercise that's bad for you, it's taking it too far that's bad for you often.
Or even, as we all know, pain and injury is I I always get a little bit frustrated when clients walk in and then they had a session with the physiotherapist and they're like, well, the reason is X, Y, and Z. The physiotherapist is X, Y, and Z. And trying to be as respectful as possible, I always say pain and injuries is multifactorial. It's your like you said, your genetics, your stress level, how well did you sleep, how active are you, how's your capacity, how's your regeneration, how's your family life, how's your sex life. It's everything boils down to it, where you cannot even pinpoint it sometimes. It's like and right? Yep, go ahead.
And mechanically as well, it can be like one issue here and this issue here is causing that issue there that's causing that. You're compensating all across your body. And yes, it's a pet peeve of mine when you see YouTube videos where they're like, this will cure your back pain. It's like, no, it almost certainly won't. Like, I'm not saying they're not good tips. It's not good, but there's not one like for the, and also I do think they're valuable often, but if it talks someone out of seeing a professional, because you could have, if you've got back pain, you could have a tumor. I've been trying to communicate this lately. Like you can't just start doing this one exercise because you saw it on YouTube and it's definitely going to fix it. It might be unfixable, and not to be negative,
but it's the
you
truth.
Need to get it.
It's the truth.
You need to get it seen by someone. Like maybe do that exercise too, or tell that professional. But don't be like, this one exercise, oh, it's just this. Oh, you have that problem because you did this. Like, you don't know,
but
like you say, anything about this person.
You know what's funny about this? It's the clickbait, or I call it legit bait, because I do this too. I think everybody does this.
Oh, me too.
And why? And here's the key. Why are we doing this? Because people want that. That's the crazy thing. They want this one exercise to be the cure to cancer, right? So they want that. And so there is such a huge demand for simple solutions to complex problems that if you don't do it as a YouTuber, for example, then you're left out of the equation. So what I do is then I come up with some crazy titles. For example, in your case, I said, what did I say? The binary messed up.
I thought I was in
It made a huge mistake. All right? And,
I was watching it like this.
And every time I gotta do this because it's so funny. Even in this video, I'm probably call it the functional fitness showdown or something like this, right? Where people are like, oh, what's going on? These guys are battling each other. No, we're just having a conversation. But people want that to a certain extent. So that's one thing. But you're mentioning very interesting points about the biomechanical reality, which is most definitely true. But at the end of the day, I always want to, stick to my knowledge base and tell people, listen, do you think it's the swing that hurt my back? Then sometimes I say, well, it may be not ever doing swings was the reason why you hurt your back, and now a couple of swings are now exaggerating exacerbating the problem, right? But at the end of the day, it's so multifactorial that I cannot tell you that this is the reason. Let's just explore. Let's experiment with different exercises, and like you said, if that thing persists, you might as well go have to check it out. Stop that YouTube thing for a moment. Go to a medical professional, to a real, a person who studied this stuff, not just a YouTube video,
and then see you in person.
Exactly, and then they can help you, right? So lots of things can help you, but sometimes, two things can be true at once. Yes, this exercise can help you, but it's also, you might have a bigger issue at the end of the day, right? So that's the crux of it all, and that's what I love about it. That's why I love fitness, because it's so many factors come into play, and you never stop learning if you are an avid listener, right?
It's like a murder mystery or something.
Exactly.
Frustrating sometimes when you fix one thing and realize something else is wrong. But like, you learn so much about yourself. Like I watch my running form, and like one of my arms flails, my right arm. Other people have commented on it, and I'm like, why? Like, to me, that's really interesting. And like, by going down that rabbit hole, I'll learn more about myself, and I'll, it'll possibly fix something else down the road. But like, everyone's got these sort of, and sometimes it's just genetic. Like, you might have one leg longer than the other or whatever, or it might be something that you can fix. And just learning these things about yourself, just that's fascinating. And that's something that will stick with you. Like, whether or not you lose the muscle, you lose the cardio, the knowledge you've gained and knowing this about yourself, that's something you can always bring to your workouts going forwards. That I think super valuable. I think another part of the problem is that people don't want to, especially on YouTube, don't want to seem like they don't know everything. And that's why when someone says like, I've got this pain, and they're like, oh, it's caused by that. Like, it was quite hard for me originally to say to people, like, I've got a bad back, because then people are like, well, I'm not going to buy your book if you've got a bad back. Like, why should I? Like, you can't fix your own back.
I see.
But there's nobody out there is bulletproof. Like, I don't care who you are. Like, you could have the best system in the world. If you land wrong, you can hurt yourself. So, but the problem is, because everything's so black and white and quick on YouTube, the minute you say like, I don't know what's causing this, it really hurts, they're like, oh, he's an idiot. Like, so I've been trying to like overcorrect lately, and I'm just showing all of my, like, as much of my it going wrong as possible. Just because I think it's really important to normalize that, because someone can be incredible, but it doesn't mean that nobody's incredible and knowledgeable at everything. And it's good to admit where you're.
But people, but it's
even
like
the best will get hurt.
But isn't it it's the superhero complex? It's people watch your stuff, so they think, all right, this guy's very solid in this type of area, and so all of a sudden they hear, all right, so it seems like this guy has a shortcoming. That's impossible. So let me fix this. Yo, Adam, I think the reason why you hurt your back is because you don't eat a lot of meat. Right? Like, bro, no, hey, just let me be a human. I'm not I might hurt myself. And speaking of form, when I was really, here's the thing. I'm very obsessed with technique and form. Or let's put it like this. I used to be. Back when I mean, in a very short time period, we were able to climb the ladder of kettlebells, so to speak. 4 years ago, nobody heard of me, and now it's like, lots of people understand. All right, this guy is about kettlebells and stuff.
Yeah.
And funny thing, Dan John once said, he said, I don't want to be known as the kettlebell guy. And I'm like, all right, let me take that spot. I'll take that spot. I want to be known as the kettlebell guy. Most definitely. Give me that there. I got it. But so the issue is with the, I forgot what I was trying to say. See, sometimes I lose my train of thought. See, I'm not perfect, so I'm losing my train of thought. What was I trying to say?
Well, that's what we were saying.
Yeah, but that's what we're saying. It's all about understanding that you're not perfect in a sense, understanding that, now it came back. So as I was really deep into technique and form, then it's like Bruce Lee. I love the 3 stages of cultivation. I have 4 books of Bruce Lee that he didn't write himself, which is it's such a pity that he died too early, which by the way, he died because of a medication problem. How silly is that? Possibly because he had back pain issues from his fights. He took medication, which seems something created in his brain. A hemor. What was that? Hemor. Something.
Edema, maybe. It's
or
kind
a tumor,
of inflammation of the brain of some sort, wasn't it?
Yeah. And so that's very sad that he passed so early that he couldn't write a book himself. So I got Striking Thoughts, which is a collection of his.
I got that one.
Oh, that's a good one. Then I got the Tao of Jeet Kune Do. Then I got another one that was written by one of his earliest students. I think he's from the Philippines. I forgot the name. Right. But the key is, Bruce Lee was talking about 3 stages of cultivation, and this makes so much sense. So in stage 1, you are unscientific. It's the stage of innocence. I love it. So the first time you swing, the first time you snatch, you are yourself, you express yourself, but you're not scientific and you're not mechanic. You do not understand, right? And then you go into level 2 or stage 2, which is the stage of information. So now you gather information, you learn the science, you learn the mechanics, which means you're going to become less you, and you have to adapt to certain forms. And then when you reach stage 3, at the stage of innovation, this is where you then venture out and create your own idea. And Bruce Lee followed this up with saying, when I got started, the kick was just a kick. Then I learned about the kick, and I realized, wow, there's 1,000 facets about the kick that I didn't know. And once I've learned them all, I realized the kick is just a kick. So that's what I realized too with kettlebells. And so I consider myself being at that stage 3 currently, where I realize, man, a swing is just a swing, right?
Yeah.
But being very form obsessed, I once posted a video where I was rowing at my water rower, and boy, these comments.
I know. If you
they roasted me.
Like
they roasted me. They're like, Greggy, what kind of form is this? Or I showed an old back squat of me. Wow, what kind of a stupid back squat? And I'm like, guys, do you expect I'm so perfect? But then at the end of the day, he probably
have to do everything right.
Yeah, I got to do everything right. But maybe he came back and bit me, right? Because I was so form obsessed, and now look at me rowing like an idiot. But
yeah.
I
get so many comments on my boxing form, because it's I think it's improved, But like, yeah, there are certain circles where people are extra, extra. Like kettlebells is one of them. I think
Oh
kettlebells
my
people get
God.
very, and yeah,
Yeah.
martial arts people are like, whoa. I think
Martial arts too,
I
right?
spoke to
Mm-hmm.
what yeah, martial arts is massive like that. I spoke to one guy and he was just like, I'm not like he's a big fitness influencer. I won't say his name in case, but he said he doesn't want to
Right.
show martial arts because they're so like critical of it. Like you got to do it perfectly right. But yeah, no, you're absolutely right. There's definitely like a fine line to be walked because you obviously don't want to just encourage, like you say, to pick up too much weight and just go crazy or to have
Mm-hmm.
no respect for the form whatsoever. Like there's like for me, like learning to box a bit more properly. Like there's so much to the way that you generate power from the hips, and it's so interesting. And same with like you do. Like I can do technically a pseudo I can do a straddle planche push up, but if I showed any calisthenics athlete, they get very angry because it is not like it is
Did you show
only
it to somebody and
by
they got angry?
no one actually has done. I've seen other people do similar things to me and get grilled, but they've
Oh,
got nice to me. I think
all
because I
right.
said at the time, this is shit. Like I know it's shit, but like I use like almost entirely momentum. I've
Yeah.
got like my tailbone is I've got the it is tucked the wrong way. It's just there's no scapular protraction. It's awful. But now I've only just started to do the straddle planche properly, but for like a second. But it feels so good because I know the technique's proper. Like, so I'm not like I don't think anybody, and it's fascinating, and then you do get a bit like, well, he's claiming and he's teaching, but he's not doing it. I put all this work in and I achieved this the proper way, and these people are doing this. So it's not like it's not worthless, but like you say, it's almost like it's a tool. Like you shouldn't be scared of not doing it completely right, as long as you're doing it safely and using a lightweight. Then use it to guide you and to learn and to get better.
Mm-hmm.
And then, like you
Mm-hmm.
say, once you become a master, or at least you develop a certain level of skill, then you
Mm-hmm.
can move around and you can play with it. Like for someone like Grant or like I can't remember his name, the guy from Marshall Club. Like I can now, I learned finally how to like generate more of a snap with my
All right.
with my
All
right
right.
cross,
Yeah.
and it feels really
Yeah.
good. And now I can say I'm going to throw a right cross, but I'm not going to keep it close to my body. I'm going to do like this, but still generate that power. And to me, it feels great. And I'm like playing with it and expressing myself, but I haven't really earned that right. And when people watch it, they go, dude, keep your elbows in, like it looks shit. But if someone like Grant or the Marshall Club guy did that same move, they can sell it because they've got such an understanding, so much experience. Like they've earned that right. If
Yeah,
you see what
yeah,
I mean,
but that's
almost.
that's being
Yeah.
being a specialist, and I think funny thing. I remember back when I was with a friend. We were at a particular. We were bowling in a bowling hall, and then there were starts, and there was with this one boxing. What do you call it? The small one, not the big bag, the small one where you
Oh yeah, the speed bag. Yeah.
the speed bag, but it wasn't a speed bag. It's just this one of these bags where you can punch, and then it rates your punching power,
Yeah.
right?
Okay. Oh
And
yeah,
then
I know what you mean.
right, and then him and I, we were there, and I'm like, dude, I never really punch. So the only thing that I understand is maybe rotating strength from the rotation from the hips, and so he's like, yeah, let's test it. So he's the first guy, and he takes like 5 steps back and comes with a huge haymaker, boom, right? And
Yeah.
I remember I saw one guy once. He was standing like a little distance, and he was just boom. And that's what I realized is it's not the distance that you have to walk to come with a huge haymaker, but it's the rotational power from your hips and your body. You give your whole body into it. And even though I never throw punches, and this is not my thing, I got close to his numbers. I was like, oh, I'm fairly okay. He's a taller guy.
Yeah.
And I'm like, oh, that's cool. I don't punch. I don't understand it. I love watching it. By the way, I just saw how Usyk took down the giant, right? The Tyson Fury, which was crazy, right? But I do not understand the science. But when I see somebody pointing it out, this is where it gets really, really interesting. I saw this one video. This is fascinating, where you might have seen or remember the fight where you had Anthony Joshua against Ngannou from the MMA.
I've not seen it.
Right? So, but Ngannou, the MMA guy, big guy, right? So then they had this boxing match, and Ngannou had a boxing match against, I think, was it Fury's younger brother or some? No, he was against Tyson Fury, and Ngannou actually survived, right? So Tyson Fury
Yeah.
didn't put him to sleep. And Anthony Joshua, I think it was the first or the second round, he was boom and goodbye. Guy was knocked out. And so when you see it for the first time, it's like, wow, this is crazy. And then you had an analyst who understands the movements, the distance, which I didn't even know. In one instance, he was talking about Mike Tyson's, where he was like, Mike Tyson knew that he can take the guy down. The only reason why he was throwing jabs is because he was measuring the distance.
Yeah.
And I'm like,
yeah.
oh wow, that makes sense, right? You have to understand, I got to get a little bit closer. I got to watch this is fascinating. So, when you have a specialist analyze the technique, this is fascinating.
Yeah, I love that. I love that about martial arts in particular, because it gets so deep.
But when we do it,
kettlebells there.
Yeah, same with kettlebells. But when we do it, who are not teachers, who are just practitioners, or just for fun, why do you expect me or you or somebody else who's not? For example, when I do heavy squats, I'm sure I have 120 kilograms on my back, which I consider heavy for my frame. And I have 92.5 kilograms on the bench press, which I also consider heavy for my frame. I guarantee you that technique is not perfect, but I don't care because, hey, I do this for myself. I love it. I enjoy it. I don't go completely balls to the walls where I think, oh, I'm not able to survive this. Can I improve with my technique? Yes, probably, but I'm not a coach. I don't teach it in that regard, right? I don't teach powerlifting. I don't teach using very heavy weights. So that's not my expertise. And you mentioned a couple of minutes earlier when you were talking about that people are so obsessed with one particular specificity where they say, hey, I want to get to the 155 kg bench, right?
Yeah.
Where I think the issue is that you have lots of people in the fitness sphere telling us that we should train like athletes.
Yeah, you definitely do.
But you know what I say? I say, no. We're not supposed to train like athletes because athletes specialize.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's it.
So if we train according to a powerlifting athlete, we specialize in an area that we don't have to go into. Look at the strongman guys, right? The big guys where maybe 1% or even a smaller number of the 1%, or 1% of the 1% can make money off of the sport. But you have lots of people think that, I got to get these heavy backs, these heavy stones and all that kind of stuff. Where I'm like, dude, this is typical strongman stuff where I'm assuming, like you said, you're probably missing out on other areas. But since you think you have to train like an athlete, you're missing out on other important areas.
Yeah. And also just like, I don't know, it's not about, exploring things or having fun or like challenging yourself anymore. It becomes like very competitive. And I do think social media has a lot to answer for, because we see this, the standard of like calisthenics in particular. You watch people and like some of the stuff they can do is borderline superhuman. But like the average person isn't going to be doing a planche on 2 fingers. And like, it's cool if you can do that. But I spoke to the bodyweight warrior Tom Merrick. He's awesome. He said that he learned to do a one-handed handstand, and he's a very tall guy, which was incredible. But he said like for like a year, that was pretty much all he trained, was to get there. So like that's a huge sacrifice in terms of everything else. And like these people who and as well, there's lever lengths and there's your body type. Like if you want to do like he, for instance, isn't going to do a planche on 2 fingers because he's tall. Like, I don't think you want to be, a light frame. You want to have relatively short legs and things to be able to do this. And so if you're not built like that and you're obsessed with being at the top and you're like pushing yourself, it's just a recipe for like disappointment and not enjoying the gym and injuring yourself. Whereas like, if you're like, I'd love to do this, I'm going to practice it every now and then, but I'm not going to go crazy about it. And if I don't get it, well then, it's the journey. It's not the destination, just sort of relax about it. Like I think in general fitness, like people get so serious. A lot of the issue with like, these videos critiquing, particularly like powerlifting, and it's not even just that they're critiquing, it's the way they do it. Like they get so angry, like, how dare you come into my house and do it like this? And it's like, dude, this is no fun. Like who wants to train like that? Like it was miserable. Lighten up.
Yeah.
Like
that's what I'm trying to do.
I think.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah,
That
a lot of it sort of, I think as well, like the grind set mentality, the alpha mentality, like, we got to be the best, we got to push the hardest, lift the
yeah,
most. It's
but
like,
oh my,
well, that must be exhausting being like
you
that all the time.
you're opening another can of words with that
I
alpha.
know that's a big can of worms.
Oh my God, oh
but
my,
but
I
there's a
just
definite crossover there,
yes, most definitely.
unfortunately.
I realized, by the
Yeah.
way, that there is a specific niche that's called the manosphere.
Oh yeah, yeah.
The
It's a
red
certain.
pill manosphere. I'm like, what is this? I
I
never
know,
heard of
right? It's
this.
a can of worms.
It's that kind of worms where people were like, if you don't make $100,000 a month, you're you're worthless. I'm like,
Yeah, exactly. You're
dude,
not driving a Lamborghini or a pussy. Like
you don't have a
whoa, man.
Rolex.
Yeah,
You don't
right.
have sex with your wife every 5 minutes,
Yeah, I
bro.
genuinely wouldn't want. If I had a Lamborghini, I'd break it within 2 minutes. I put coolant in my oil reservoir the other day. I had to take my.
Right,
I've only got a Vauxhall. Like,
right.
I don't understand this mentality. But then they
I don't
apply that
either.
same logic to training. Like, if you're not lifting this much, then what do you
Oh
even lift, bro? It's
yes.
like,
Oh yes.
I don't want to lift that much. I want to just go in
And
and
oh man,
have a
and
nice time.
you about lifting that much and having a nice time. I saw this was big on YouTube a couple of weeks back, and I think it's still ongoing. I mean, on YouTube you have lots of these reactions and commentary channels, but which by the way make the biggest numbers of views. When you
Yeah.
comment on the actual either the culture war or videos or anything, these guys get views like crazy. This is crazy, like
Oh yeah, no, they do.
the
Yeah.
right. And so there's this one. Have you heard of Bedros Keuilian?
I've not no.
So they came up with this. He was an owner. I followed him for a long time on Instagram, and he was an
Yeah.
owner of the Fitness Body Boot Camp. So a very successful entrepreneur. And then he came up with a boot camp that's called the project, the Modern Night, the Modern Project.
Oh no, I've seen the night thing. Yeah, with guys getting buckets of cold water thrown at them and things. Yeah.
Oh my!
It it,
And this
it
is
seems like a
this is
grift. Let's.
it looks like it. And if especially if you see that when solid military drill instructors comment on it and give their feedback. And this is why I love these reactionary stuff, because when you have a professional
Yeah.
actually giving you feedback telling you, bro, that's not what we do. The reason why we
Yeah.
have everybody marching, and this is fascinating. You probably can confirm this since you studied psychology. He said one of the reasons why you want to have people move in the same at the same rate, same speed, yelling at the same time. It's at 1 and 2. The reason for this being is you want to create a cohesive unit. And you can do
Yeah.
this by having everybody do the same thing at the same time. It's not about yelling and screaming. It's about creating a cohesive unit, which was fascinating to me. I didn't know this. So it has
Yeah.
nothing to do with beating people up. And then I also made a little reaction to it because I felt like, wow, as a trainer, yes, you can motivate people. Yes, you can give them a little bit of tough love, but at the end of the day, they still have to get some enjoyment out of it. You still want to be careful with
Yeah.
that low capacity ratio. And my
Yeah.
God, this is
Yeah. And I think it's going to solve like all their problems, and suddenly they're going to be happy and respected and
how
liked and things.
how
And I try and move that away from fitness in general. Like I say, I've been strong my whole life. I had six pack abs when I was a teenager.
mm,
It
mm,
didn't help me with girls. It didn't like what helps you is just, relaxing a bit and chilling out, and like, especially for the younger viewers, I think, like, you know, I don't know. It's just you don't need to be like on it all the time and like
no,
insanely tough
you're gonna burn
and
out.
all
You're
this.
gonna
And
burn out if you are.
yeah, you're gonna burn out, and also
Most
just you're gonna
definitely.
like you're not gonna because you're paying someone else to teach you how to be manly and strong and things. It's
Mm.
already kind of backwards, and like you're just gonna end up being a bit intense and weird, and it's not gonna
Yeah,
help you do all
weird.
these.
Weird is a good description. I'm like, these people are not normal. It's like, bro, nobody acts like. I consider I've been doing this thing now for 8 years. So I have a self-employed business for 8 years, and we thank God I'm grateful that we are very successful in what we do. So I consider myself an innovator, a creator, a leader for my business that I do. and I want to be there for my family. I want to help them out. I want to be, of course, physically strong, so I can, for a couple of years ago, my brother had a serious car accident, and he almost died. And in that case, I wanted to be as strong as possible for the family.
Yeah,
And in certain instances, and I see that my family kind of leans a little bit towards me because I'm let's say I am the most successful in my family now. I'm kind of like breaking out of the mold of not being able to pay the bills. I'm not saying that my parents couldn't do this, but let's just say I'm reaching a next level of success that my father and my mother was able to build, and I'm taking it to the next level. And I'm grateful for this. And the only thing that this thing teaches me is to be more and more humble, quiet, be upbeat, learn as much as you can, and not walking around like a bull inside a china shop. That's
exactly. Yeah,
it's
being
so
strong for your
backwards.
family usually means like trying to cheer them up and being compassionate and listening to them. Doesn't mean being
Love is the greatest
you,
strength.
yeah.
That's what it is,
Your
man.
bench press ain't gonna help anybody when when your family needs you. So do that as like your hobby, but don't kid yourself into thinking this makes you like the ultimate man or whatever. It's just a hobby, and ultimately it's how you respond in those crises. And it's something I've noticed when I've watched your videos. I love that you're always open-minded, and whenever you watch something, like I like, you can see how you've taken ideas from people and integrated them, and like it's only benefited you. And you could be like, no, it's my way, they're wrong, what an idiot. But you don't
I
gain
was
anything
like
from
this.
that mentality.
Exactly. I was like this for not I wasn't stubborn, but I was kind of like and then I open up, and just like Bruce Lee again. You take what it's worth, and you discard what is not. And here's a big important disclaimer. Then people, and you probably have this happen to you as well. Then people come up and say, Gregory, I heard that you're not a big fan of the Turkish get-up. And I'm like, I now call it the circus get-up because it's a circus exercise. And they're like, but why? I'm like, because it doesn't give you these ultimate mega benefits, and that it's not the magic bullet that they touted. I know its origins. I know where it comes from. I know that Steve Maxwell brought it into curriculum back in the RKC world days. And yes, they were coming up. If you see a Turkish get-up for the first time, it's very captivating. It's like, wow, what is this? Wow, what is this guy moving? Don't get me wrong, it's a fancy, cool exercise. I do it once in a while, but it doesn't have magic bullets in it. And I would say squats, press, swings, farmer's carries, and cleans, and burpees, nothing goes against the powerhouses, the basics. You don't stand a chance against these exercises. The Turkish get-up doesn't have, from a practical perspective, doesn't have a chance against these exercises. But here's the key. I'm not a big fan of the exercise. I do it once in a while. And now you hear somebody else saying, but this guy loves the Turkish get-up. And I'm like, great for him. But you don't seem to like it. Well, I guess we differ in opinion. So it's hard for people to fathom that Adam from the Pioneer, he may like something, but Gregory from Leberstock, he doesn't like it. How is that possible?
Yeah, right? I like the kettlebell halo. I know you're not a big fan of the kettlebell halo.
Exactly. And lots of people and lots of people in our comments actually like, I like the halo. And I'm like, hey, and they describe why and all that. I'm like, awesome, cool. Kudos to you, Godspeed. Great that this exercise is helping you. I just think it's not the magic bullet. But if it helps you, awesome. Right?
Yeah, I made a short recently saying like no exercise is mandatory. And I think that's like a really
good point.
Like with like this, in particular the squat and the deadlift and the bench, like people are so like you have to do them. Like what you're not squatting, that's ridiculous. But there's loads of ways you can get those same benefits. And like I don't really deadlift, and the reason I don't really deadlift is predominantly because it just takes so long to set up. And I can't be bothered, which isn't a great reason to give. But like, if I go in the gym, I don't want to do it. And it's not that I think it's a silly exercise. I think it's a brilliant exercise. But you got to get it's never on the floor already. You got to load the weight, and then it's tipped to the other side. You pick it up, slide it on. By this time, I could have done something.
Already got into the workout. I'm already sweating by the time you load your barbell. Exactly. Same here, and that's one of the reasons. That's the benefits of owning a gym. I have my one power rack, and I have my squat. It just stands there. It's always loaded when 110 kg, because I hate loading it. And I let it there because
Yeah.
with 90% of our clients, we never squat with the barbell. We squat with body weight or we squat with the kettlebell. And there's one point that I would beg to differ to a certain extent, Adam, and that is there is a practical application to a squat, a deadlift, and a press. I think these are very powerful, basic human movements.
I think those patterns are pretty much fundamental, but like, you can get those patterns in other ways. Like that's I think doing the swing, that's my hip hinge, so it's not the end of the world if I do less of a deadlift. I also like a kickstand deadlift or a dumbbell deadlift. Like so it's those. I think
I
a
get where you're
squat in
coming from.
particular, we were designed almost to like we all of our movement is built around the fact that we should be squatting. So I'm not saying don't
Yeah.
squat. But
Yeah.
I'm saying you don't have to do this squat, like
This particular, I get where you're coming from.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Same here. Same here.
Yeah.
It's when you hear, I think this is probably where it comes down to what Mark Ripetto from Starting Strength has been pushing all the time, where it's like it's the big three. He's not the only one. Lots of people like it's the big three exercises.
Yeah.
It's the bench, the deadlift, and the squat. And if you don't do this, you're worthless or something like this, right? And this
Yeah,
is
that's
where,
it.
this is where I disagree too. I'm like, come on, guys. Hey, are you able to bodyweight squat? Awesome. I guarantee you, do 5 sets of 20 bodyweight squats. You feel it the next day.
Yeah.
Even if you have very
Yeah,
strong
or
legs, you
or
probably
Hindu
feel it. And go, or Hindu squats, right? Or fast squats, overhead squats. How about this?
Yeah.
Pistol squats. How
Yeah.
about this, right? So just the movement, I love how you describe it. The movement patterns in general, they're powerful, and we should be engaging in it if we want a lot of bang for our buck.
Yeah.
But it's not that you need this particular one. It's same here with the swing. It's in the kettlebell sphere, it's like you got to swing this way. And I'm totally against this. There is no, you got to swing it this way. And I even would go as far as to say that swinging a heavy kettlebell with as explosively as possible, I am not sure if this improves and increases your speed. What I would say is, because I read a book, somebody sent me a book and he was asking if he can jump on a podcast and we can have a discussion. So he said, the reason why I come up with this is because he said in the book, the reason why you weren't able to finish first in your run, in your race, in your jogging race or marathon, is because you weren't fast enough, right? So the guy next to you was running faster. That's the reason why he won. And a heavy or fast swing can help you. Here's my point. I would say I beg to differ. I would say strength training in general, lifting heavier weights, this might help you bring up your strength. But here's what I learned from a very recognized biomechanist and from lots of the folks that I had on the podcast and lots of trainers and coaches. They say strength in general must be applied to the specific skill that you then want to use in your sport. So bringing your deadlift up to 200 kilograms doesn't mean that you're faster in running. You have to become stronger, and then you have to apply it to your sport. And so that's a very interesting question, which I'd like to ask you that question. What do you think in that sense? Do you think that you have this one guy, he shows up, he says, Adam, I lost my marathon race. I wanted to end up first, and I ended up second. And so this one guy tells me I should swing faster. I should swing heavier kettlebells more explosively. Do you think I should do this? Or should I just lift heavier, get stronger, and then do more running? What would you say?
For that, I would say that, combination of the two. I think definitely swinging faster and harder, like it's ballistic, it's more explosive. If he's looking for speed, it's going to help. Also building the strength. But then there are like lots of other things he can do as well. Like, for example, the tendon stiffness in your ankle is gigantic for your running speed and because that create, you were talking about the rebound earlier and the cheetah or the leopard. You look at their Achilles tendon, it's like this. And like this is something JC Santana talks about, is how important that is. Because if you look at the studies, there's not actually that much plantar flexion of the foot when you're sprinting. It's almost an isometric hold for the calf, with the rebound being created from the tendon. But like that's not to, I'm not going down this road of
so
saying,
it's not a muscle question
like,
from that perspective, right?
Not,
it's rather a ligament
no.
question. Interesting.
Yeah, but that's not to say that muscle's not also important.
Of course.
And then there's other things you can do that like have been shown to have amazing transfer. You got like your Oh, I'm having a brain fart. The hamstring, bodyweight hamstring curls, Nordic
The Nordic
curls.
curls. Yeah,
So
yeah,
you've
yeah.
got, yeah, and sort of various knees over toes movements. But then, yeah, exactly like you say, it's also about practicing that skill and like, you want. But I think there's a benefit to doing all those things together if you want to be at the top of your game, which is obviously hard because then you've got to manage recovery and you got to like, because
Yeah.
that now you're
And
doing
then you
quite
have
a
to
lot. So it's
yeah,
all
and you have to quite a lot. And that's my
so
point. That's my
yeah,
point, Adam. My point is, if you have to choose, like, and you have this professional, let's say you have a professional runner, right? A guy who's at the top of his
yeah,
game. You can't give this guy like, because in the sport specific phase, here's what I learned from the Russian literature when it comes to preparing athletes. So you have phase 1 where you have the GPP phase. So in that phase,
yeah,
we want to get everything up. We want to build your endurance up. We want to bring your strength up in every area. So lots of time in the gym, or lots of time with the weights, lots of time on the treadmill and stuff. Great. In the SPP phase, where the guy's now specializing, that's phase 2. This is where you have 80% of your work is done in the skill realm, or if you're a
yeah,
boxer, it's in the ring. If you are an MMA athlete, it's in the octagon, and only 20%, or a runner, you're running, and only 20% is then in the weight room, right? So the and then you have the competitive period where you want to get adapted to the competitive environment, and then you have the transitional period. Very interesting model. And here's my point: if you have to choose the best exercises and the best sport specific exercises, you got to be very selective. So it's a very
yeah,
so the selection
yeah.
comes into play. And where I come from is, or what I see is, lifting weights faster doesn't automatically make you faster.
No, no.
It's
I mean, it's just one tiny piece of the puzzle, and
if it is, because here's the point that I learned about explosive training. I've learned from Dr. Yuri Verkhoshansky's work, which, by the way, Pavel Tsatsouline quotes Verkhoshansky a lot. And Verkhoshansky was one of the leading biomechanics in the Soviet Union. And when the Soviet Union broke down, he emigrated to the US, I think. And Dr. Michael Yesses, he's now 92 years old. I had him on a podcast too. He's one of the leading biomechanists. He talked to Dr. Yuri Verkhoshansky, had conversations with him. And what Dr. Yuri Verkhoshansky is famous for is the shock method.
yeah,
And
yeah, the depth jump.
the depth jump. And period. The depth jump is how
The
they
myotatic response. Yeah,
yeah, where you land and you want to be boom. And then you see athletes, these guys jump like gazelles, like boom, 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 right?
yeah,
So
yeah.
and they tell you, as soon as your body hits the ground, you immediately want to rebound, which goes into that ligament strength again, I'm assuming, right?
Yeah, yeah.
And this is
Yeah,
where
it's
you
like
build
you're saying, it's not all muscle.
and this is where you build the explosiveness. But then you hear the other guy saying, yeah, but fast kettlebell swings do the same. And this is where I'm, we get into the weed of things. But this is where I'm a little bit, not sure about it. If I'm saying, bro, yeah, do some swings, great. But I had what's his name again? He was a honored master of sport from Slovenia, Gregor Sobocan, a beast in the kettlebell sport world. One of the very few Europeans who was actually kind of decent at the Russian level, because in the kettlebell sport realm, if you're not Russian, you have no chance. It's just simple.
Yeah.
And so Gregor Sobocan was heavy in the kettlebell sport world. And so he's now coaching the volleyball team from Croatia or Slovenia. I asked him, are you including the kettlebells into your GPP and into your prep? He said, no, not at all.
Yeah, well, for volleyball, I wouldn't even necessarily know for that one. I mean, you've got jumping height, haven't you? But yeah.
That's it. Jumping
certainly
and
you can build that.
explosiveness. Here we have it again. But then that's just where I'm coming from, is if the kettlebell was so valid, and I'm a kettlebell guy. I love kettlebells. But sometimes we ascribe characteristics to the kettlebell where I'm just a little bit, are you sure about that? It just sounds like a marketing gig rather, right? So explosiveness is rather built with a different tool than just with kettlebells. What is what I'm trying to say?
Yeah. Well, I mean, yeah, but like you say, that's a really, like, you're really getting into the weeds. For starters, the kettlebell it's less cut and dry than saying like a barbell back squat, because it is ballistic and it can even be plyometric. I do kettlebell jump squats, which is something I quite like. Yeah, I mean, if you want to learn to jump higher, then jumping with some weight is a no-brainer, right? And there are studies showing that will improve your running speed and your jump height. But again, all the studies as well, you got to take with a pinch of salt, because it depends on the design and like what factors
most
are included in the things.
Yeah,
I think then, you've got people.
Yeah, go ahead.
You got
Go
people
ahead.
like Mark Ripto, and he'll claim that you can't convert muscle fiber type, and you can't do this and that. So
Which is
the only thing worth doing is
this is a joke. I mean, you
it's
see that the
not
muscle fiber
correct in my
types are on a
opinion.
spectrum, right? Some may
Yeah, of
transfer.
course.
It, yeah, just yeah. Keep going. Keep
Yeah.
going.
And then beyond that as well, it's not just about muscle fiber type. It's about the neural drive. It's about like of course the elasticity. There's so many factors.
Yeah.
So to that end, like obviously this being sort of my area of interest, when I was sort of doing this, I was always, you know, when I was training a range of different people, I was trying to like systemize it. My model that I came up with, and I'm kind of adapting it now for my next book. I called it the ATNSP hierarchy, which was
Oh, cool.
attributes, traits, networks, skills, practice. So you've got, so
Wow.
say your
Say that again.
practice
Say that
or
again. Attributes, skills,
attributes, traits,
traits,
skills,
skills,
networks,
networks,
practice. So,
practice.
so NSP, network skills practice. So
It's a hierarchy,
yeah,
right?
so
From the top down.
so, so
Kind of
basically
like.
you've got your practice, which is like whether it's football, whether it's boxing, whether it's anything
Yeah.
else, that's
Yeah.
comprised of a certain number of skills, which is, you know, your kicks or your punches or your
Yeah.
throws or whatever your sport is. That's
Yeah.
comprised of a number of networks, so like motor patterns, whether it's, you know, the whether it's just, you know, rotating your body, whether it's, you know, the Mexican sarape effect or whatever else. And then you've got your, beneath that you've got your traits, which are the more global, like strength, like cardio endurance, but even they can be specific to certain body areas. Like you always think of
Fascinating,
endurance,
yeah.
but you can have great endurance at swimming and not good endurance at sprinting. It's not as cut and dried. And then you've got attributes, which I say, like, you know, it's arbitrary because you can break it down as far as you want to go. You could break it down to the atom, but I'm saying like this muscle or this amount of. So then how do you train somebody? So you can look at what their practice is, whether it's volleyball or whatever, and then you can break it all the way down to all the individual attributes they need or the general traits they need. And what you see is like it's an insane amount. It's too much to train. And then of course you've got, I call them like things that you can't change. You know, like they've got their fixed attributes. I call them, like, you know, limb length and things.
Yeah.
So but the thing is, it works both ways. So you can improve the attributes and the traits, and that will feed up to the practice and make you better at your sport. But you can also, improving at the sport will improve your ability, will improve all those attributes and traits. So it works both ways. And so for me, who's interested in becoming just generally better, if I want the most bang for my buck, actually it's doing the sports that's going to give me the most, because that contains all of those attributes. And if I want to train specifically to build up an area that's missing, then I can go down and dig in and be like, why aren't my glutes firing? But if I want to just be someone who's fast and endurant and can cope with multiple different, you know, then I want to do martial arts, or I want to do football or trail running, because it contains all of those things at once. You're like getting them almost by osmosis. Like if I go for a trail run, I'm training so many angles and speeds and things that I couldn't possibly replicate in the gym because it's far too complex. But at the same time, I'm not doing any of those things with enough intensity to stimulate a massive response. So the balances are kind of like
It's give and take.
Combination of the two. Yeah. And something I've found that is an option is to actually take your practice, but make it more intense, make it more specific. So the example is rock climbing. I say I can use rock climbing to build amazing grip and lat strength that's also extremely varied, and then the commenters will say, well, Adam, it doesn't build lat and grip strength because you should be taking a weight on your legs if you're doing your rock climbing correctly. That's their like aha moment. But I'm saying, aha, I did this on purpose. I'm not using my legs. That's what I'm saying. I'm making it harder on myself in order to develop those, you know, to increase the intensity while still getting the amazing variation you get from rock climbing, which compared to doing a pull-up or chin-up, like you're just doing that linear motion. But pull-up, you know, rock climbing, you're reaching in every single direction. That's so, like, you know, talking about robust movement patterns again. But I'm doing it in such a way where I'm doing it with the added resistance because I'm not letting my legs help, you know. And that's a way you make the practice more difficult, or you hone in on that area, and you get that's quite a nice middle ground between the specificity while still covering lots of factors.
Very interesting. I think that's one of the core tenets of the hardstyle idea, is to make the kettlebell heavier and move it faster and make it harder on yourself, which to a certain extent I see. The other aspect where I have a little bit of an issue with is the human body tends to want to work as efficiently as possible. So
Yeah.
making it harder on yourself can close or can it is walking a tightrope between getting these additional benefits that you've mentioned and creating unnecessary effort, right? It's
Yeah,
just
yeah,
like
yeah, and especially, yeah. Sorry, carry on.
yeah, just like if you have a heavy back squat, and this is a great example because we talked a little bit or gave in parentheses Mark Ripto some flack from Starting Strength, but I read his book, Basic Barbell Training, at least like 3 or 4 times. I think it's an awesome book. It's powerful stuff about leverages in the barbell and these exercises in general. Bruce Lee approach again. You take what works and you discard
Yeah, yeah,
what doesn't. But he mentioned you don't want to create an unnecessary effort when you have a very heavy barbell on your back, and now you have it right aligned inside your center of mass, approximately, sitting on your hips and in the middle of your feet. And now, as soon as and I'm talking about a very heavy barbell, it's like maybe
yeah,
one
yeah,
of them 50 kilogram for me. It's like, wow, I'm dying with the thing, right? And
yeah,
now you start moving it a little bit outside your center of mass. You're gonna feel it immediately. And now you might say, yeah, but I do it intentionally because I want to get more work done. But here's like, bro, you're creating unnecessary effort, right? So
yeah,
keep that thing in that center of mass to work as efficiently as possible, which, by the way, is one of the reasons why the weightlifters are the strongest guys in the world, right? I mean,
yeah,
look
yeah,
at
yeah.
it's so fascinating when you look at people like the strongman. These are the strongest guys in the world, and this is Eddie Hall is the strongest man in the world. Blah blah blah. I'm like, Lu Xiaoyan. Look at the guy, the weightlifter, clean and jerky 160 or 170 kilogram, 170 kilograms with 70 kilo body weight or 75. That's like crazy relative strength. That's
Yeah, yeah.
and look at the heavyweights. The heavyweights they clean and jerk what 250. The I would say one of the strongest human beings on planet Earth is Klokov, a legendary weightlifter. And there's this one video where he does a hang snatch. I don't know what the weight is, but it's beyond heavy. So he grabs this heavy barbell, he lifts it up to his shins. It's in the hang position. And he
Yeah.
stays in that hang position for almost a year. Right? He stays so long in that position. You're like, this guy's crazy. And then he goes, bam, snatches it overhead. And you're like,
When you've lifted a little bit of weight, you can feel it, can't you? When you watch them do these things, you're like, "Oh,
yeah,
wow."
it's funny. It's funny when you have. It's great that you're saying this. If you've been lifting weights, you understand how heavy that stuff can get. When you see a hang snatch from Klokov, where he rests in that position and not a muscle is moving, the barbell is in a stand. It looks like a still image. This is skill practice and strength merged at the highest elite level. And I love watching this. One of the reasons why we love watching elite athletes, right? Because they are so incredibly specialized in that area. But here we have it again. Probably his cardio could use some work. Probably maybe his
most
heart,
likely.
right?
Yeah.
Most likely.
Yeah,
And then
we don't know,
that's,
but it's high chance.
yeah.
But yeah,
And that's,
in those scenarios, that having just that efficiency of movement, of course, is going to translate to like the most performance. And like you say, if your interest is in being in the top, then yeah, it's that the Bruce Lee quote is, I practice one, not 1,000 kicks once, but one kick 1,000 times. Like that's how you become and so strong at moving the weight. And of course, he's going to have great transfer to other types of movement. But yeah, the suggestion of like making the rock climbing harder is more if you just want to build the general base of power. I wouldn't recommend that to a rock climber because they want to be working on the correct technique. It just depends on what your goals are.
Interesting.
But then it is interesting as well, like whether you can some people will argue that if you train, like for example, if you were to train using a cable to strengthen your baseball swing, you've got the cable loaded there,
Yeah.
so you're pulling against resistance. But will that teach you the wrong biomechanical pattern, so that when you then go to swing a baseball bat, you're now swinging it as though it's connected to a cable? And someone
Good
said this,
point.
and obviously this is very relevant to what I discussed. So I did a lot of research on it, and at the time, I couldn't find any evidence that's the case. As long as you're repeating the baseball swing enough, And like, in this scenario, again, that's a movement like that is very much about myotatic stretch responses, actually, because like the hips move before the rest of the torso, which creates the stretch, and then which is why it's so important to remain loose so that you can then like snap that thing round.
It's
So
like
like, yeah, in
catapult.
theory, pushing the weight, pulling the weight from behind you, that is a different skill, because you're not there, you don't use the myotatic, there you're grinding through. But then I couldn't find any evidence to show that this interference effect would be an issue. And then you think, like, I can write the letter A and I can write the letter B, and learning the letter A hasn't made me sometimes accidentally write A when I need to write B, So
Yeah, good point.
the body can differentiate between these movements as
I
long as
think
you're skilled enough.
I had a great discussion with Dan John about this. He said one of the reasons why you don't want to throw a heavier one of the reasons why you want to get used to the implement is because like you said, which it seems like you haven't found a lot of evidence for, is you want to have these neural patterns, understand the exact movements and the exact dosage of the strength that you need in order to throw that weight or throw the baseball. Don't throw a heavier baseball. This might interfere with your movement patterns. And I think the reason what he said is you have to be careful if these movement patterns are very close to each other. So what I would beg to differ is probably say, when you say this, right, I would consider this probably an SPP exercise, a sport-specific exercise where you want to replicate the throwing movement with some resistance, which might make sense because you're actually training the joint action. Plus, you're strengthening the whole girdle to maybe resist injury and all that kind of stuff, which might be a good thing. I think Dan John then said the reason is not that in your case probably that you use a heavy cable. The issue may arise if you use a weight that's fairly similar to a baseball, and then it might interfere. So then it's just like interfering with the movement patterns when you learn a swing with only explosiveness, and then all of a sudden you have to loosen up. And your body is completely messed up and that's what I've learned from Dr. Michael Yeses. He said, learning a skill is all about efficiency. When you learn something for the first time, then your brain has to execute all the movements. And this requires a lot of brain power and RAM, and this makes you tired. Yeah. And that's why you can't think about anything else. And when we teach the swing, it's like, oh, there's so many things that you have to think about. And then we always break it down and we say, just focus on one thing. Stab your feet to the floor. Stab your feet to the floor. Ignore the rest. But then once you have perfected the skill, the brain then takes itself out of the equation to a certain extent, and now your muscle directly communicates with the spinal cord. Interesting.
Yeah.
And now, but as soon as you mess, I think it's like that slope that you mentioned with the ski, right? As soon as you start messing a little bit with that little bit of movement, so you use a little bit of too heavy or too light, then maybe the patterns can get mixed up. I think this is where maybe this issue comes from. But I would probably also say let's experiment with some heavy pulling or replicating that motion with some heavier weight to safeguard your shoulders so you don't get hurt when you throw the baseball, right?
Yeah. But and you want those muscles stronger so that when they do fire, they've got greater capacity. I say
and the same thing, Adam. And the same thing, before I forget. And the same thing is that I mentioned earlier is when you build strength or when you become stronger, you then have to implement that strength into your skill. If you don't do this, you're probably messing up. That's a big part.
And I say the cable behind you instead of the heavy ball as well, because that way the resistance is in the right direction. With the heavy ball, you're sort of getting stronger at supporting the weight.
Yeah.
Which is where cables and things and bands are so useful. But and that's like with the kettlebell as well. When you're doing like the more hard style swing, and learning to relax the body as well as exert the strength, because there you're building the strength, but you're also learning to when not to use it, because a lot of improving the movement and where something like the cable could be a problem is the muscle co-activation, the irradiation, which is what makes you stiff. But if you can build the strength and you've still learned the control to keep the muscles relaxed so that you can choose when to turn them on and off. And it's not that simple, of course. And
of course, but I get what you're saying.
Pretty technical.
We're getting deep, but I love it.
Yeah. You can have the strength, but not necessarily have to use it. And then with the slope example again, there is, of course, the decision to make, like how narrow and how wide do you want that route to be? Because like when you're doing sports, particularly something like martial arts, like there won't be any two movements that are the same. Like if you're throwing a kick, like you're going to be off balance, you're going to be tired, you're going to have the guy pushing you at the time, or you're going to be moving forwards, you're going to be aiming higher, lower. Like, so whilst I think you should, train the one kick 100 times, you also kind of need to train the one kick 100 different ways, because if for me, you see me training outdoors all the time, it makes such a huge difference. Whether or not I can handstand depends a lot on the shape of the ground, because if I'm on a slight incline, and if I wanted to be a professional gymnast, then I'd say, well, I'll just practice on a flat ground, because that's where the competition is going to be. But if I want to be able to do a handstand reliably, then maybe I want to practice on uneven ground, because I want to be able to do it just for my own, because I think it's cool. I want to do it on a tree trunk. I want to do it on a tree branch, on a bench. So, but that means I need to compensate for the fact that my body's leaning forwards when I'm on there. Even like a kettlebell swing, if one foot's slightly higher, or if you're on a slight incline, and then you're fighting the weight more, it's trying to pull you over.
I see it most definitely.
So in sports, like when you're running, when you're kicking, when people are pushing you, you don't have any two movements that are the exact same. So you have to, again, it's a fine line. You got to choose how much specificity do you want, and how much variation do you want to incorporate into that. And it's you can't start incorporating the variation really until you've got a basic understanding.
The GPP, and that's why in the Russian literature they say with the GPP, that's the first thing that you have to get started, because we have to bring your body up to speed so that it can handle the load that it then gets in the second phase. And that's what a lot of people miss out, right? They see somebody being really intense with heavy weights and going all in, and this is also where injury can happen, where you're like, bro, this guy spent years in the SPP phase, and now you don't even have your basics up. Just focus on the basics first. And this, I get that. And I get that people then can sometimes overdo themselves or overexert themselves. Just today I had a client, she walked in, she's like, oh, I'm a little bit brain fog, bro. I'm like, how many times do you train per week? She's like, oh, 7 times. I'm like, whoa, why? And she's like, yeah, because of the belly fat. And we told her so many times, listen, belly fat now has nothing to do with training. You can't out-train it. Let's just focus on the diet a little bit more now. She finally realized it. And in that case, you have to pull them back a little bit. But in most cases, you're absolutely golden with learning the basics and pertaining to the kettlebell. And this is where I'm a big proponent of, is understanding that the kettlebell, from the way it's built, I believe, and this is where I differ with the hardstyle guys, I believe it's one of the best strength endurance tools and not one of the best strength tools. If we talk about strength tools, nothing comes close to the barbell. If you want to become the strongest ever, I'm standing on that ground that lifting a heavy barbell or squatting a heavy barbell that you can incrementally load, this is how you can get the strongest to a certain extent in a particular movement, right? But the kettlebell, first of all, the load is not given. You don't have 200 kilogram kettlebells, even though they made them, which I think doesn't make sense. And even we have a 92 kg kettlebell. I can swing that thing because it's so high, right? The load is so high up. It's still heavy, but then it gets the inertia going, and then it flows by itself. It floats by itself.
Yeah.
And so where I differ with the hardstyle guys is this ultra full tension thing, where I say, listen, on the grinds, I'm on the same page. A heavy press, a heavy squat, a heavy lunge, a heavy deadlift, a heavy row. You got me on this. Even a heavy get-up, a heavy windmill. That's a grind movement. This requires structural integrity and tension throughout the whole body and strength. I get it. But the ballistics, I grab the 32 kg and do 2 minutes of swings with this kind of like hand-to-hand hybrid style, because I want to get into this cardiovascular movement a little bit. I want to get my ligaments stretched, and I do not see this explosive element that much as these guys see it. And I also don't see why we want to work as inefficiently as possible with an exercise like, for example, the snatch, where you teach it with as much explosiveness as possible, but then at your certification, you force guys to do 100 snatches. Well, that's strength endurance territory.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So and mismatch. You don't tell a marathon runner to use sprinting technique to run the marathon. Just like you wouldn't do vice versa. And this is where I have a little bit of a contention, where I don't really understand where they come from. But again, that's just the nuance at the end of the day. But I just love to talk about it. I'm very vocal about it. I just love kettlebells. Think it's one of the best strength endurance tools. And as soon as you want to become the strongest ever, I don't think the kettlebell is the best implement.
Yeah, but strength endurance in itself, I think, is just underrated, and
Oh
that's part of the
yes,
problem. Yeah,
100%,
because
100%.
that's I think a lot of people, they sell the stuff as building strength because everyone wants strength, but I think actually what people probably want more and don't realize it is strength endurance, because
Good point.
like you never have to lift something really heavy once, like outside of the gym. You normally have to lift something quite heavy lots of times, or carry it or
For a longer
whatever, and
time,
that's
yeah.
where, yeah, and
Good
that's
point.
why strength endurance for most people makes more sense. And and where you're learning, you in particular would like to do it in the most efficient way possible. That can translate to doing other movements in the most efficient way possible. Which what I do like about the hard style is the relax and then the tension, because like as they're learning to like be relaxed when they want to be, and then be strong when they want to be, and I think that can
But
be
funny thing,
very
Adam, if
useful.
I may interject a little bit. Funny thing is when you look at
Yeah.
the hardstyle movement, that swing, they're almost never relaxed. When
Yeah,
you
it doesn't look it, does it?
when you swing, let's just I've learned it from a hardstyle practitioner, my brother Luca. I love this guy. He's awesome. He's from Canada. We disagree a little bit on certain topics, but this guy's awesome. So he taught me the hardstyle swing, and even the hardstyle snatch. There is maximum tension throughout the movement. So when the kettlebell floats, the only thing that's relaxed is the kettlebell. You're still like this. That's why they
Yeah.
call it a standing plank. You're boom, right? That's the reason why you're dead after 10 swings with a heavy kettlebell.
Yeah.
That's the reason why
Yeah.
they tell you should stop and blah, 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 right? Relaxation is when you look at the sport, how these guys move. This is where relaxation and tension comes into play, especially when you look at a clean and jerk. And I really want
Yeah.
you got to check this out. The clean and jerk, the long cycle, this is the proper definition of relaxation and tension, especially with double kettlebells. You swing both kettlebells up from the backswing, so you use the pendulum technique. And when you swing the kettlebells up, of course you use the inertia, but you use that little explosive push that they say you stomp or you stab your feet to the floor. And from a physical
Yeah.
perspective, if you stab your feet into the floor, the weight comes up. All right, so this happens, boom, it comes up. Then you rack it in the rack position, you completely relax. And by
Yeah.
relaxing, I really mean the weights rack on your skeleton. And if you do
Yeah.
that
Yeah. I've seen the way
technique
you do it.
this is crazy. I'm not even good at this. You see other guys that are way better. So you rack it, and then your body's supposed to completely relax. Your quads should be relaxed. Your hips should be relaxed. Even though you have 64 kilograms, that's the heaviest, the double 32s,
Yeah.
on your hips. Then you relax and you breathe. They call it cobra breathing, where you have two kettlebells on your lungs in that regard. So you
Yeah.
have that back, and then you have to learn to breathe from here, where the back is moving up and down. Fascinating stuff. And then when you dip and bump the weight up, this is where the explosive tension element comes in. Boom, the bells come up. And here's one of the fascinating things about the jerk is with double kettlebells, or even with one kettlebell. When you fall into the second dip and you want to catch the weight and decrease the distance of the kettlebell traveling, you have to relax your lower body, but tense your upper body. And how do you have to do it? This is so fascinating and takes ages to learn. Is the bells come up, and when they come up, you boom. You drill your humerus, your upper arm, into the shoulder blade to get a nice fixation. This is where tension comes back in. And then you drop the kettlebells back down, and then you relax, and then you drop. This is the perfect description of tension and relaxation. And
Yeah, and even simultaneous in different parts of the body, which is
that's the fascinating thing. It's
Yeah.
you gotta have the body. The upper body's relaxed, the lower body's tense, and then you have to go up, back and forth. And I'm not
Yeah.
saying this from a perspective. I don't care about neither styles. I actually don't care.
Yeah,
It's
yeah.
just what makes the most sense. And
Yeah.
I'm not saying that if you get your benefits with being stiff all the time with a ballistic movement, go ahead and do it. If you like it, go ahead and do it. Godspeed. But from a logical perspective, when you swing from a ballistic perspective, you need tension and relaxation to completely relax the body with semi-heavy weights, because you cannot power lift semi-heavy weights.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
if you do, you should be just as strong as the guy deadlifting a heavy barbell.
Yeah, well,
Are
need to
you?
use
No,
more
you're
weight,
not.
wouldn't you?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you're not as strong as this guy, right? So
Yeah.
there is a difference. But I'm getting ahead of myself.
Yeah, no, it's cool, and like I think a lot of people like learning to relax, especially if you've come from a background of powerlifting and bodybuilding, is like probably more useful for a lot of people. Again, I'm the worst at it. I carry so much tension. It's a combination of the bodybuilding and my personality as well. When I went to Tai Chi, they'd be like, Adam, relax your shoulders. And I'd be like, okay. And they'd be like, you haven't done anything. I'm like, no, I'm relaxed. And they're like,
I just look like this. I'm alpha, bro. Relax.
Yeah. Well, my body thinks it is. I'm getting slightly better, but it's taken me so long to like learn to. And that. An injury can definitely come that way. And also, in martial arts, like when I spar with Grant, and I get gassed out so much faster than him, even though I do an awful lot of endurance training. And he says it's because when I throw a punch, my whole body's tense. When he throws a punch, only the right muscles are tense. So I'm using so much more energy than him. And I know it's like I'm aware of it. I haven't practiced it enough to do it properly. And you're doing those reps and reps of that.
And maybe jumping a little bit into the kettlebell sports side of things can help you, because then you can understand how to completely relax the body, even though you're working with weights, and then relax your face. We call it the Joker, the poker face, not the Joker face. Yeah. And you see this with the professionals, and I try to do this all the time. And you see when guys are doing YouTube videos, they're like, and even science says that if you have a relaxed face, it's a display of skill. This means you have your body in control, even if you're moving heavy weights. And if you look at the professional kettlebell sport athletes, the high-level athletes, I call it the zombie face. They snatch 200 reps with a 32 kg, their face turns dead. They look like this.
Activation again, isn't it? They don't need to tense their whole neck.
Exactly.
And that's that sense of the rest of the body as well.
Yes.
Santana uses that as a cue. He says, relax your jaw. And like, that's massive. If you remember to relax your jaw, you're like, oh.
Yeah, it relaxes the body, and it tells your body what muscles to contract and what to relax. And that's the fascinating thing about when you look at the martial arts. And jiu-jitsu. Good point, right? This is how you have to understand what to tense and what to relax. And that's a skill that I've learned through kettlebells, because I was just as tight, because I came from the bodybuilding world. I was like, Ugh. And when you see bodybuilders try for the first time, they're like always tense and always like this. And it's a good thing to loosen up and relax a little bit. But Adam, I got to jump. I got to run in 3 minutes. I have another call. Man, this was...
No,
This is fascinating.
I think we both nerding out big time there.
We could go forever, and I see. I knew you'd be on that. I knew you'd be on that the same frequency, because watching your content, and people be like, "Oh, I can't see that crossover," because we definitely vibe with each other. This is so awesome. So, Adam, here's what's going to happen. First of all, thank you so much for appearing on the podcast and giving us your time. That was really cool.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.
Man, you're welcome. And here's what's going to happen. So I'm going to edit the video and everything, and then I'm going to let you know once the links are up. And I'm going to send you via Instagram, I'm going to send you an image that I did, which if you can take the same image from your face, we can do this kind of face-off thing. Then I can send it to my thumbnail artist. He can design something cool, and then we have a cool video. And then it's gonna be on the podcast. Great. Yeah, it's gonna be cool. So it's gonna be on the podcast, the whole conversation, and then an excerpt. I'm gonna put it on the main channel, and then I'm gonna send you everything on your Instagram. Is that cool?
Awesome. Thanks a lot. Yeah, that sounds brilliant to me. Can't wait to see it.
Adam, man, I appreciate your time. We definitely have to do this again. All right?
Yeah, I feel like there's so much
so much that we haven't even touched yet. Yeah, most definitely.
I know it.
We help aspiring kettlebell coaches become confident as kettlebell practitioners and educators in only 10 weeks. If you want to find out more about our method, check the first link in the description and sign up for our waiting list.